let's talk about Greenpeace USA. They published a new report outlining how they think big banks and others should be responsible for helping to move Bitcoin away from proof of work, the energy intensive mechanism behind the cryptocurrency, and towards proof of stake, which they see as a better alternative for a greener future. Greenpeace USA is an affiliate of Greenpeace International, the, I believe, European-based climate organization that most people are fairly familiar with. Though they don't directly work on Bitcoin, Greenpeace USA has made Bitcoin a part of its organization, and they've been going after Bitcoin for quite a while, encouraging the Bitcoin community to change the code, quote unquote. Even earlier this year, they made an interesting sculpture that was embraced by Bitcoin Twitter as being extremely badass. This story itself comes from The Verge, talking about how, we need to change Bitcoin a little bit. And I think JP Morgan has something to do with it. I definitely have my opinion on it. And as disclosure, I do work for a Bitcoin mining company running media for them. Jen, throw the story over to you.
Well, when I read this, I immediately thought of that skull of Satoshi, which the entire Bitcoin community embraced. I don't know if Greenpeace was expecting that reaction. But, if you know the community, you know to just expect the total opposite of what you want to happen. Greenpeace latching onto the crypto narrative, I think, is interesting because it feels like probably the narrative that's going to get them the most attention. It feels like maybe the most edgy narrative from like a communications and marketing perspective. I think there are so many ways that they can achieve their mission of highlighting the issues that are going on with the people and the planet and trying to preserve the planet. And it's interesting that they choose Bitcoin to focus on. The fact that there are so many institutional players launching products that have to do with Bitcoin, I think, is the key here. They're looking at some of the largest asset managers in the world who are filing for spot Bitcoin ETFs, launching Bitcoin products, and Greenpeace is looking at this and saying, okay, now's the time where we can get in the headlines, we can attach ourselves to these large asset managers, and maybe someone will do something. The solution that they are presenting, though, I don't know if it's the right way to go about encouraging discourse around this. They talk about changing the code. I assume they're talking about moving away from proof of work, but that's kind of Bitcoin's whole thing. That's what keeps Bitcoin what it is. That's what kind of is one of the things that makes it not a security. And so I would love for Greenpeace to go out there and latch on to narratives that have to do with, renewable mining. I love to shill gridless on this show. I think if we look at projects that are creating value for all stakeholders and look at how maybe that offsets some of the energy consumption, we could have a better discourse around this. Wendy, what do you think?
You guys aren't going to like what I have to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. I don't think Bitcoin is really that bad for the environment. I feel like it is
Why would we not like that?
It's just a cheat. Well, hold on,
Jen,
because
we're not supposed to take sides on the show.
I have to, because you guys, I'm just tired of hearing about Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Like, everybody says Bitcoin is bad for the environment, and they're sitting there tweeting it from their iPhone or their Android phone, and then they go flying in their private jets, and they're going here, and they're going there, and they're doing this, and they're leaving this carbon footprint. I mean, the president of El Salvador literally solved the issue, is using the 100% geothermal energy generated from volcanoes to, power on Bitcoin. Like, it is okay. Things are going to be okay. I feel like the world is focusing, or actually not even the world, public servants are focusing on problems that don't necessarily exist. Yes, it is important to say Bitcoin does X to the environment, but when you really take a step back and you look at all the other things that we do use and how bad they are to the environment, it's just not really, they're just playing like 10D chess with us. And at this point, we need to take a step back and say, enough is enough. Bitcoin is just fine.
I agree with you, but I do work at a Bitcoin mining company, so it might be a little biased as well. But no, I think it's a fair point. Greenpeace USA has been running this campaign for, I believe, about 2 years. They were funded by Ripple, I believe, and again, fact check on that. We'll take a look at that over the break, but I'm like 95% certain that was a lot of their paycheck for running this campaign. And Ripple is a competitor to Bitcoin in a lot of ways, right? Like, they're not proof of work, they're an alternative asset, and that's why they would push forward with that. On the Greenpeace front, like, it makes sense for them to jump into this, right? Because there's a lot of money flowing into Bitcoin these days, especially if an ETF goes live. For them to push this research, which they've actually sort of been shuffling around the board for a few years now and just keep like rebranding it, is not that surprising. It's a really good time for them to do it. with all the money floating in. And the conversation for Bitcoin hasn't really changed too much, right? Because Bitcoin hasn't changed, and the proponents of Bitcoin aren't willing to change the code at this point either. And they seem increasingly unlikely to.